My name is Emma. I'm 28 years old. You might think that's too young to feel like everything in life is falling apart, but here I am, standing at the edge of it all, with no one to catch me. It was the kind of night you'd expect in a sad movie, the rain slapping against the windows, the wind howling outside like it wanted to tear everything apart. I sat on the couch in the dim light of the living room, the only sound the slow ticking of the clock and the occasional crackle of the fireplace. It was meant to be a peaceful evening, but it was far from that. Lucas had been distant for months now. It started slowly at first, little things I brushed off. He came home late. He no longer kissed me like he used to. The conversations we had were dry, devoid of the spark we once shared. His eyes would glaze over when I spoke, like I was some background noise, something he was just tolerating. I could feel the gap between us growing wider with each passing day, but I didn't know how to close it. I tried everything, small gestures, attempts at conversation, even the things we used to enjoy together. But nothing worked. Then that night, everything broke. I don't even know why I chose that moment to ask him. Maybe it was the exhaustion from holding it all inside for so long. Maybe it was the way I felt like I was losing him, piece by piece, without any explanation. The silence between us had become deafening. And so, with the weight of it all pressing down on me, I turned to him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't you care?" The words hung in the air, fragile like glass, just waiting to shatter. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, a plea for some kind of acknowledgement, any kind of feeling. I wasn't asking for much. I just needed to know that something, anything, was still there. That I wasn't invisible to him. But when he finally spoke, his voice was cold, colder than I had ever heard it before. "I'll be gone by morning." His words sliced through me like a knife. There was no emotion behind them, no regret, no hesitation. It was as if he was speaking about something trivial, like leaving for a work trip or going to the store. But this was different. This was him giving up. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They fell freely, like the rain outside, as I tried to process what he had just said. I looked at him, hoping there was some mistake, that maybe this was just his way of pushing me away temporarily, that tomorrow he would apologize, and everything would go back to normal. But there was no apology. No comfort. Just that same coldness, the same distant look in his eyes that I had seen for months. He didn't even try to hold me. He just turned away, leaving me with nothing but the sound of my heart breaking in the silence of our home. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind racing, my emotions a tangled mess. How did we get here? How did we go from being so in love to this emptiness? I wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, to tell him that I was still here, still fighting for us. But deep down, I knew it was too late. He had already made his decision. And in that moment, I realized something important. I was losing him. But I was also losing myself. I wiped my tears away, feeling numb, and stood up. I looked around the room, at the life we had built together, and for the first time in months, I saw it clearly. The walls, the furniture, everything that had once been part of our home now felt foreign, as if it belonged to someone else. Maybe this was the end. Maybe he was right, and there was no going back. But something inside me stirred, a tiny spark that refused to be extinguished. I couldn't let it end like this. I wouldn't let it. As I stood there, staring at the empty space between us, I realized that no matter what happened next, I had to fight. I had to fight for myself, even if Lucas wasn't going to fight for us anymore. The storm outside wasn't the only one raging that night. And neither was I. Looking back, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment when everything began to unravel. Relationships don't just fall apart overnight. They crack in subtle, painful ways, like small fissures in a wall that eventually grow wide enough to bring everything crashing down. Lucas and I met when I was 22, fresh out of college, eager to step into the world with big dreams and even bigger hopes. He was everything I thought I wanted, charming, ambitious, and kind in a way that made you feel like you were the most important person in the room. For the first few years, it was perfect. We traveled, laughed, and built our little world together. I remember how we would sit for hours, talking about our future, imagining what our life would look like. There was love, there was passion, there was no question that we were meant to be together. But somewhere along the way, we stopped talking about the future. I can trace it back to a single event, but that's too easy. It wasn't one single moment, it was a series of them, small but powerful, each one pushing us further apart. It started when my mother got sick. It was a slow decline, and I spent more time in the hospital than at home. Lucas was supportive at first, offering to take me to appointments and helping around the house. But as time passed, his support became more mechanical, more like an obligation than an act of love. He stopped asking how I was doing or how I felt. His hugs were distant, his conversations short. He didn't want to talk about my mother's condition or my worries, it made him uncomfortable. And I let it slide. I told myself that it was just a phase, that things would get better once my mother recovered. But she didn't recover. The day she passed, Lucas wasn't there. I don't mean he wasn't physically present, he was at work, which was fine, but he wasn't emotionally present. I needed him that day. I needed him to hold me and tell me it was going to be okay, even if it wasn't. But he wasn't there. When I came home that evening, I found him watching TV in the living room, as if the world hadn't just turned upside down. When I told him what had happened, he said, "I'm sorry," in that tone people use when they don't really know what else to say. That was when I started feeling invisible. Months passed, and the emotional distance between us grew. I tried to talk to him about it, about how I was grieving, about how I felt alone, even with him there. But his responses were always the same: "You're overthinking things, Emma. I'm just tired. I need some space, okay?" I was suffocating, but I didn't know how to breathe without him. I tried everything. I would cook him his favorite meals, buy little surprises, plan date nights, hoping that he would see that I was still here, still fighting for us. But no matter what I did, it never seemed enough. His work became his excuse. He spent long hours at the office, never wanting to talk about anything personal when he came home. He became cold, distant, like a stranger living under the same roof. Then, one day, I found a note on the kitchen counter. It was small, written in his handwriting, and it simply said, "I'm sorry, Emma. I'm not the man I used to be." I stared at the note for hours, unable to comprehend what it meant. Was he apologizing for the way he had been treating me? Or was he apologizing because he knew something was over, something we couldn't fix? But I didn't confront him about it. I didn't want to seem weak or needy. I told myself that I could handle this, that I could keep pushing through. But deep down, I knew I couldn't. The breaking point came when I asked him, as I had done so many times before, if he still cared. If there was any part of him that still wanted to fight for us. But he didn't answer. And when he finally spoke, when his voice turned cold and indifferent, I felt the last piece of my heart shatter. "I'll be gone by morning," he said. That was the moment I realized that all the love I had given, all the sacrifices I had made, meant nothing to him anymore. He wasn't leaving because he didn't love me, he was leaving because he had already checked out emotionally long before that. And that hurt more than anything. The morning after he left, everything felt eerily still. There was no dramatic scene, no angry words exchanged, no shouting. It was just quiet. The kind of quiet that felt like a void, a place where everything important had been drained out, leaving behind only the hollow echoes of what used to be. I woke up early, my eyes swollen from crying. The bed was cold, empty, and for a moment, I thought maybe I had imagined it all. Maybe it was just a nightmare, a bad dream from which I would wake up, find Lucas beside me, and everything would go back to normal. But the empty side of the bed said otherwise. The silence in the house screamed the truth. He was gone. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky, and walked to the kitchen. The sun hadn't yet risen, and the house was still dark, save for the soft light coming from the window. I poured myself a cup of coffee, but it tasted like ashes. Nothing felt real. Nothing felt right. How could he just leave? How could he say those words, "I'll be gone by morning," and then actually follow through? I tried to convince myself that it was just another phase. That maybe he just needed space, that he would come back when he realized how much he meant to me. But the truth was beginning to sink in, Lucas wasn't coming back. He had already made up his mind. I spent the morning wandering through the house, unable to sit still. I picked up the picture frames from the mantel and ran my fingers over the photos. There we were, smiling in Venice, laughing in the park, celebrating our first anniversary. It all seemed like a lifetime ago, a different version of me. I didn't recognize her. The woman in the pictures was full of hope and love, while the woman standing in front of those pictures felt empty, like a shell of who she used to be. I went to the living room and sat on the couch, hugging my knees to my chest. I stared at the blank wall ahead, waiting for something to happen, waiting for some kind of miracle to make everything better. But nothing came. No apology from Lucas. No sign that he still cared. Just the cold reality of his absence. I thought about calling him, begging him to come back, but I knew deep down that it would be useless. He had made his decision. And as much as I hated to admit it, so had I. I couldn't keep chasing someone who didn't want to be caught. I couldn't keep begging for love when all I got in return was indifference. That's when I saw the letter. It was on the kitchen counter, tucked under a pile of papers. I hadn't noticed it before, probably because I was too lost in my own pain to pay attention to anything else. But now, it caught my eye. I walked over to it, my heart racing. It was in Lucas's handwriting, but there was no address, no greeting, just a few simple lines. "I'm sorry, Emma. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I ever loved you the way you needed me to. I've been distant for so long, and I don't know how to come back from that. I don't want to hurt you anymore. Maybe it's best if we let go." The words hit me like a slap in the face. They weren't an apology. They weren't an explanation. They were an excuse, a way for him to absolve himself of the pain he had caused. And it hurt more than anything he had said the night before. Because now, it wasn't just that he was leaving me. It was that he was walking away without a single ounce of regret, without any real remorse. I didn't cry this time. I couldn't. I felt numb, like the letter had stolen the last bit of emotion I had left. I folded it up, walked to the trash can, and threw it away. It wasn't worth holding on to. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I didn't have the energy to clean, to cook, to do anything. I just sat in the quiet of the house, letting the emptiness wash over me. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, but I didn't know how to change it. It wasn't until that night, when the house was still and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, that I realized something. Lucas had left. But I was still here. I was still breathing, still alive, still capable of feeling. And that was something he couldn't take away. For the first time in what felt like forever, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let him define me. I wasn't going to let his absence be the thing that dictated how I lived my life. I would find my own way, even if I had to do it alone. That was the moment I started to let go. The days after Lucas left blurred together. I went through the motions, barely feeling present in my own life. The world outside seemed to be moving at its usual pace, but I felt like I was standing still, frozen in time. I had spent so long trying to make him happy, trying to be what he wanted me to be, that I had forgotten who I was, what I wanted, what I needed. The phone calls came every few days, but I never picked up. I wasn't ready to hear his voice, not after everything he had said, not after everything he had done. He had made his choice. Now, it was my turn to make mine. But then, one afternoon, as I was sitting on the balcony, trying to enjoy the quiet, my phone rang. It was him. Lucas. I didn't hesitate this time. I pressed the answer button, feeling a mix of dread and anticipation. Emma, his voice cracked slightly, and I could hear the exhaustion in it. I need to talk. I swallowed hard. My first instinct was to hang up, to block him out completely. But something in his voice stopped me. There was a desperation there, a crack in the facade that made me pause. Why now? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Why after everything? After you left without a word, after everything you've put me through? I know, he said quietly. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But Emma, please, just let me explain. I've been an idiot. I've been running from everything, and I don't know how to fix it. But I'm willing to try if you'll just listen. I felt a knot form in my stomach. He sounded sincere. But I had been here before, hadn't I? I had heard apologies, excuses, promises of change that never came. Still, something inside me needed to know if there was more to this. Maybe I needed closure, or maybe I just needed to hear the truth from his lips. I stood up and walked inside. Fine, I said, my voice shaky. I'm listening. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could tell he was gathering his thoughts. I don't even know where to start. Emma, the truth is, I've been distant for a long time. I've been unhappy, and I took it out on you. I pushed you away because I was too scared to face my own problems. I was selfish. I thought if I ignored everything, if I ran away from it, it would all go away. But it didn't. It only got worse. I closed my eyes, trying to keep the tears at bay. Lucas, you broke me. You left without a word, without any explanation. You just gave up on us. I know. And I hate myself for it. But I've been working through things. I've been talking to someone. I'm not the same person I was when I left. His voice faltered, as if he were unsure whether I would believe him. Emma, I don't expect you to take me back. I don't deserve that. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't respond at first. His words hung in the air, heavy and uncertain. I wanted to believe him, part of me still did, but another part of me felt the deep wound he had left behind. Could I really let him back in after everything? I'm not the same person either, Lucas, I finally said, my voice soft but firm. I've spent so much time trying to fix things for you, for us, that I forgot who I was. I can't keep living like that. I can't keep waiting for you to change when I've lost myself in the process. I understand, he said quietly, as though he were finally hearing me. And I'm sorry for making you feel that way. I never meant to hurt you, but I know I did. The silence stretched between us, and I could feel the weight of it. I wasn't sure what to say next. Part of me wanted to tell him that I missed him, that I still loved him. But another part of me knew that love wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't enough to repair the damage that had been done. Lucas, I can't go back, I said, my voice barely a whisper. We can't go back to what we were. Maybe we both need to heal separately before we can ever think about being together again. I heard him exhale, as though a weight had been lifted. I understand, he said again. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. Goodbye, Lucas, I whispered, feeling my heart shatter just a little more. Goodbye, Emma. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. The call had been everything I had expected and nothing I had hoped for. I had wanted him to come back, to say he'd made a mistake, but the truth was that it didn't matter. What mattered now was what I was going to do with the pieces of my broken heart. I couldn't keep holding on to someone who wasn't willing to fight for us anymore. The silence in the room was deafening, but it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. This time, it wasn't empty. It was filled with possibility. It had been weeks since I had heard from Lucas. The silence was no longer suffocating, instead, it was freeing. With every passing day, I felt like I was shedding the weight of the past. I no longer waited for his call, no longer checked my phone obsessively, no longer hoped that he would come back and fix everything. I had spent so much of my life trying to save a relationship that wasn't meant to be, trying to hold on to someone who couldn't love me the way I deserved. Now, I was learning to love myself again. I had started small. I went back to the gym, something I hadn't done in months. I took up painting again, the one hobby that always made me feel at peace. Slowly, I was rediscovering who I was without him by my side. I found joy in simple things, laughing with friends, reading a book, waking up without that heavy knot in my chest. I wasn't completely healed, not yet, but I was getting there. One evening, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset through the window. It was one of those rare moments when I felt completely at ease. I wasn't running from my feelings anymore. I wasn't pretending to be fine when I wasn't. For the first time in a long time, I was just being me. Then, as the sun dipped below the horizon, my phone buzzed. I stared at it for a moment before picking it up. It was a message from Lucas. I hope you're doing okay. I've been thinking about you a lot. I miss you. I felt my heart skip a beat. It was strange how something so simple could send a rush of emotions through me. Part of me wanted to respond, to ask him what he wanted, but I knew better now. I had learned my lesson. Instead, I put the phone down, took a deep breath, and smiled. I didn't need him to define my happiness anymore. The next morning, I woke up early, eager to start the day. I had an interview for a new job, something I had been working towards for months. It was a big step, and I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. I dressed up, put on a little makeup, and looked at myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She looked confident, determined, ready for whatever came next. She wasn't broken anymore. She had healed. The interview went well, and by the end of the day, I received a call offering me the position. The relief that washed over me was unlike anything I had felt in a long time. It wasn't just the job, it was the realization that I was capable of moving forward on my own. I didn't need Lucas, or anyone else, to complete me. I was whole as I was. A few weeks later, I received another message from Lucas. This time, I didn't hesitate. I opened it, reading the words carefully. I know you've probably moved on, and I respect that. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for everything. I hope you find happiness, and I hope one day we can be friends. You deserve so much better than what I gave you. I took a deep breath and sat there for a moment, letting the words sink in. I didn't feel the anger or the sadness I thought I would. Instead, I felt something that surprised me, gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons I had learned, for the strength I had found within myself, and for the chance to start over. I didn't respond to his message right away. Instead, I let it sit, not out of spite, but because I had finally understood something important. I didn't need his closure to move on. I had already given myself that. And so, I let go. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. In the months that followed, my life continued to blossom. I thrived in my new job, made new friends, and traveled to places I had always dreamed of visiting. I even met someone new, a man who showed me what it meant to be loved, not in the way Lucas had, but in a healthier, more respectful way. I didn't rush into anything, but for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to be open to love again. When I looked back at everything that had happened, I realized that Lucas had played an important part in my journey, but he was no longer the center of my story. I had written my own chapter, one that was filled with self-love, growth, and independence. As I walked into a new phase of my life, I knew that the pain of the past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined who I was. I was no longer that broken girl who cried herself to sleep, wondering why she wasn't good enough. I was stronger now, and I was ready for whatever came next. And for the first time, I was at peace. Subscribe to our channel for powerful real stories that touch your heart. Join a community where emotions run deep and every story brings a new perspective. Don't miss out, hit that bell for weekly updates.